So yeah, so this is the first session of this kind of weekend. I don't know, what do you call it? A weekend retreat? It's not really a retreat, but anyway, kind of long weekend teaching on uh, practice that's very dear to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the All-encompassing Mind Yoga. Very long title, but yeah, in the last, I don't know, really since the beginning of the pandemic, I noticed, when His Holiness started teaching online, almost every teaching His Holiness gives, and especially teachings on bodhicitta, but even, all the other Dharma teachings, even oftentimes a public talk, Rinpoche will include this practice and will advise. He often says, anyone who uh, considers herself a follower of mind, then they should meditate on bodhicitta and emptiness every day. And His Holiness often speaks about, the personal benefit he's found from doing that. And then he'll often usually advise this practice and lead a short meditation with this practice. So so this is what we'll look at this weekend. This all-encompassing mind yoga. There's a very nice booklet that Michael Losang Geshe put together. Actually, I'll share it in the chat now, and we can send out later as well. Actually, I'm not sure I can share it without closing it. I don't feel like closing it. Yeah, there's a very nice booklet that was published by FPMT, so I don't know, a few years ago, roughly, and that's what we'll use as a basis. We'll go through that booklet this weekend. I don't know, I'll share it in the chat a bit later. I won't do it now. Yeah, so that's the plan for this weekend. So we have about 6 hours, these 3 2-hour sessions, this one from now until 12:30 Pacific Daylight Time, and then this afternoon from 2 to 4, and then again tomorrow morning from 10:30 to 12:30. Yeah, so we'll look at this practice and meditate. I mean, mainly we'll do, of course, it's a meditation practice, right? So I'll explain a bit about practice in general, and then bodhicitta, and we'll meditate on bodhicitta this morning, maybe this afternoon a bit, and then meditate on emptiness. And also what's a nice part of this practice is, Michael Losang Geshe compiling it, did a very nice job of, there are verses from, a verse from Chandikirti, some verses from Bodhicharyavatara, Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, to combine with the meditation on emptiness. And then there are some verses by Nagarjuna. And maybe Aryadeva and maybe Chandikirti a bit also to support the meditation on emptiness. So we'll go through the instruction as His Holiness gave, and then those verses, how to use those verses to meditate on bodhicitta and emptiness, and then we'll meditate like that. So that's the plan. But this morning we'll start with the traditional prayers before the teachings. So would you like to lead, Bay, or shall I lead? Either way. Why not? I'll lead. It's just easier. I'll lead it. Lead the prayers. Yeah, so first, just sit quietly for a minute to gather your attention and let go of all the different distractions. Yeah, I was reading this morning while I was having breakfast. I was reading this book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And one advice he gives there, which is quite true, it's quite helpful, for controlling one's mind is to give your mind a lot of space. Don't try to squeeze it too tightly. Don't try to make too much effort to focus, but also don't make any effort at all. Kind of find the balance between, um, yeah, between just letting your mind go completely go wherever it wants, and also the other extreme of uh, kind of trying to control the mind too narrowly, too tightly. So he uses the analogy, which I don't really know if it's true or not, but he says in order to, like if you have a sheep, flock of sheep or a herd of cows, to control them, you can't, if you make too much effort, it doesn't work. And if you don't do anything, it doesn't work. So kind of need to find a middle way where you give them a big space to roam and then just watch them. Um, and then they naturally kind of go where they're supposed to go, I suppose. Anyway, as we're focusing our attention now, you know, yeah, we need some deliberate effort to try to focus our attention, but also need to be kind of relaxed and let the mind be open, not squeezing too tightly. Anyway, like that for a couple of minutes, just try to focus your attention on an object of placement meditation. Especially in this context, it'd be good to use the nature of the mind. The mind is that which is clear and knowing. And so to use your own mind as an object, just the nature of the mind, being clear and knowing as an object for placement meditation. Because, you know, later in this practice, all-encompassing mind yoga, we, we want to visualize our own mind arising as a moon disk and a vajra standing upright upon the moon disk. And so it's good just right from the beginning to start to focus one's attention on the nature of one's own mind. That'd be helpful. So try to use your own mind, the nature of the conventional nature of your mind, as a object of placement meditation for a few minutes. Mm. And then to generate positive motivation, why don't we can think about impermanence and death for this session, renunciation. So thinking, recognizing how, how incredibly fortunate we are to have this human rebirth now with faculties complete. We've avoided for this one rebirth. We've avoided taking rebirth in the lower realm as an animal or a hungry ghost or a hell being, which has happened so often before. And if we're not careful, could happen again in the future. Even within the human rebirth, we're so much more fortunate than countless other human beings. So many people are born in places where there's extreme poverty or violence or just really bad. Lots of difficulties in the environment, like really hot, really cold, a lot of disease or insects, difficult to find water or food, or very susceptible to natural disasters, like in the Caribbean, hurricanes coming, so often they're destroying people's houses. So compared to so many human beings, we have much, much more fortune. And then, yeah, live in peaceful places, have access to education, and then also have healthy body, healthy mind, free of physical or psychological kind of severe impairment. And then not only that, we met the Buddhist teachings and have some interest. Our minds are open enough and receptive to the benefit that the Buddhist teachings have to offer. And independence upon that, we can, make profound transformations in ourself as a person, and then thereby indirectly and bring some benefit to the lives of others. And also set a good course for future lives towards eventual liberation from samsara and full enlightenment. We can have the ability in this life to clearly aim our trajectory of future lives in that direction. And eventually, if we do so, then there's no doubt eventually we'll achieve those results. If we take advantage of this opportunity. But this opportunity won't last long, because death, the only thing that's inevitable to happen from the moment of birth is death. So for us and all other, all those we know, all the strangers, countless other human beings, animals that we cohabitate the earth together with, all of our lives will end in death. And for us individually, it's not sure when that will happen. Just having gone to sleep last night, it's not sure we'll wake up this morning. Having woken up this morning, it's not sure we'll still be alive when night falls today. So although death inevitably will come, that's certain, but the time death will come to each of us is totally uncertain. And so it's important, it's imperative to make use, whatever we feel is the most meaningful way to make use of this life, to do that without delay. And so we can use that as a basis, generate a motivation for this session. That in this very session, may I direct my my mind and my actions in such a way that I reduce, eliminate causes of suffering for myself and others, and that I increase and strengthen causes of well-being and happiness for myself and others. Not only the happiness of this life, but especially the much longer lasting happiness of future lives. And that while I have this incredible opportunity in this life, then I use this opportunity to maximum benefit to create causes also for my own eventual freedom from the cycle, samsara, the cycle of birth and death through the force of karma and afflictive emotions. And then out of deep gratitude for other sentient beings, we can think that we also use this life not only to work for liberation from the suffering of samsara, but to work to achieve the state of full enlightenment, the perfection of all positive qualities, in order that eventually we can be, temporarily, we can be of greater and greater benefit to others, as well as fulfilling our own aims, by the way, and that eventually we can achieve the state of full enlightenment from within which we can spontaneously, continuously, and perfectly work for the welfare of each and every sentient being without excluding one. Anyway, so thinking along those lines, beginning with recognition of precious human rebirth, impermanence, and death, and then connecting that to the bodhicitta motivation to achieve full enlightenment, generate a positive motivation. Mm, as part of the motivation, also, it's good to just visualize oneself surrounded by all sentient beings, as we usually do, with our father and male friends and family that we feel close to or feel have natural affection for. Imagine at our right and behind us, and then to our left and behind us, our mother of this life, and then those female friends and family we naturally have affection for. And then those we tend to have aversion towards. Imagine, visualize sitting directly in front, facing towards you at a comfortable distance. And then all the other sentient beings of the six realms. Imagine all in human form, seated all around us and practicing together with us. So especially since we'll be meditating on bodhicitta a little bit later on, it's good to generate this visualization and this kind of sense, our sense of interconnectedness with other sentient beings, and in order to elicit a sense of caring, an attitude of concern and caring for all sentient beings that's free from bias towards those we have affection towards and against those we have aversion towards. So try to generate, equanimity in combination with your motivation at the beginning. Yeah, and then as we recite these prayers before the teachings, we can imagine all sentient beings reciting together with us. So now for the prayers. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans. To you, Buddha Bhagawan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagawan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagawan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagawan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Sugata, knower of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagawan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When, supreme amongst humans, you are born on this earth, you paced out 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise then, I prostrate. With pure bodies, form supremely pure, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain, fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best, Savior, to you I prostrate. With a supreme science, face like spotless moon, color like gold, to you I prostrate. Dust free like you, the 3 worlds are not. Incomparably wise one, to you I prostrate. The Savior having great compassion, the teacher having all understanding, the field of merit with qualities like a vast ocean. To you, the one gone to thusness, I prostrate. The purity that frees one from attachment, the virtue that frees one from the lower realms, the one path, the sublime pure reality, to the Dharma that pacifies, I prostrate. Those who are liberated and also show the path to liberation, the holy field qualified with realizations, who are devoted to the moral precepts, to you the sublime community attaining virtue, I prostrate. Do not commit any unwholesome actions. Engage in perfect wholesome actions. Subdue your mind thoroughly. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a defective view, a butter lamp flame, an illusion, a dewdrop, a water bubble, a dream, lightning, a cloud. See all causative phenomena like this. By these merits may transmigratory beings attain the state of all-seeing, subdue the enemy of faults, and be freed from the ocean of samsara, disturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. The indescribable, inconceivable, and inexpressible perfection of wisdom, unproduced, unceasing, the nature of space, object of the uniquely knowing transcendental wisdom, to the mother of the victorious ones of the 3 times I prostrate. I prostrate to the 3 noble, rare, sublime ones. Thus did I hear at one time the Bhagawan was dwelling on Master Vulture's mountain in Rajagriha, together with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. At that time, the Bhagawan was absorbed in the concentration on the categories of phenomena called profound perception. Also at that time, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of the profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Then, through the power of Buddha, the Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara. How should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Shariputra. Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this, correctly and repeatedly beholding those 5 aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. Form is empty, emptiness is form, emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Shariputra, likewise, all phenomena are emptiness, without characteristic, unproduced, unceased, stainless, not without stain, not deficient, not fulfilled. Shariputra, therefore, in emptiness there is no form, no feeling, no discrimination, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no visual form, no sound, no odor, no taste, no object of touch, and no phenomenon. There is no I element, and so on, up to and including no mind element and no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on, up to and including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Similarly, there is no suffering, origination, cessation, and path. There is no exalted wisdom, no attainment, and also no non-attainment. Shariputra, because there is no attainment, bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. Having completely passed beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana. All the Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to unsurpassable, perfect, complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. Therefore, the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unsurpassed mantra, the mantra equal to the unequal, the mantra that thoroughly pacifies all suffering should be known as truth, since it is not false. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared Tayata gate gate paragate parasam gate bodhi soha. Shariputra, the bodhisattva mahasattva, should train in the profound perfection of wisdom like that. Then the Bhagavan arose from that concentration and commended the bodhisattva mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, saying, well said, son of the lineage. It is like that. It is like that. One should practice the profound perfection of wisdom, just as you have indicated. Even the Tathagatas rejoice. The Bhagavan, having thus spoken, the Venerable Sharad Vadiputra, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Arya Avalokiteshvara, and those surrounding in their entirety, along with the world of gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, were overjoyed and highly praised that spoken by the Bhagavan. I and all surrounding sentient beings take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha. We prostrate to the Great Mother Prajna Paramita, surrounded by her children, the assemblies of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions. In dependence on my prostrations to all of you, may these words of truth be actualized. In the past, the Deva King Indra dispelled the Maras by reflecting on the profound meaning of the wisdom gone beyond and reciting the profound words in daily recitation. In that same way, I also reflect on the profound meaning of the Great Mother Prajna Paramita and recite the profound words in daily recitation. May all diseases, spirit possessions, bad conditions, all the negative directions which happen due to past karma and immediate conditions be dispelled. May they become non-existent. May they be pacified. From the holy supreme realm of Kechara, you who possess the powers of clairvoyance and magical emanation, look after practitioners like a mother looks after her children. To the host of dakinis of the 3 times, I prostrate. Akasamara Sashadara Samaraya Pad. Akasamara Sashadara Samaraya Pad. Akasamara Sashadara Samaraya. Akasamara Sashadara Samaraya Pad. By the teachings of the 3 noble, rare, sublime ones possessing the power of truth, may hindrances be averted, may they be eliminated, may they be pacified. May all enemies and negative forces opposed to Dharma Shantim Kuru Swaha. May the host of 80,000 obstacles be pacified. May we be free from harmful conditions to Dharma. May all excellences be in accord with the Dharma. And may there be the auspiciousness and perfect happiness here, right now. I'm going to do a short mandala offering. Betty, you want to lead that short mandala offering?
And in English or
Wherever you want. In Thai.
whatever. That's translated in Thai. Sajibagi Jukshin Meto Tramri Rablingji Nidegen Padi Sangye Jingdu Mete Powayi Drogyunam Dakshin La Chubar chu jitsun la ma dam pa kenam ye chu ku kala chen tse chu tsin trik jitar sampe do jetsin mala sabke churki shapa wabtu so idam guru ratna mandala nayatayami
Ange choran
Buddha
sogi
soki shokna
chonam Ganju badu dani kyabzu chi Dagi chanen gi bet sonam ki Dola penchu sange rupa sho Sange choran sogi chonam Ganju badu dani kyabzu chi Dagi cheshe gi bet sonam ki Dola penchu sange rupa sho. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my merits of teaching the Dharma, may I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Kangi tuje nerzunde nawa tamse pameche tambe deni tensepa gadam de la chasalo. To you who, compelled by great compassion in order to dispel all wrong views, taught the sacred Dharma, to Gautama Buddha, I prostrate. Okay, so that's the preliminary prayers. Now, let's look at, oh, I have to go back to the same thing, the all-encompassing mind yoga. So this is the text. I'll send it out in the break or something, one of the breaks. And yeah, I start from the title page. Finally. The All-encompassing Yoga Mind Meditation by His Holiness Dalai Lama, translated by Venerable Michael Losang Geshe. So when was it published? 2022, so just a few years ago. I published it. Yeah, I'll go ahead and just read. Read His Holiness comments and then add things as comes up. So the all-encompassing yoga mind meditation and introduction. Yeah. So His Holiness, usually when he describes this, he introduces in different ways. I suppose I'm not sure exactly how Venerable Michael Losang Yeshe compiled it, but I suppose he probably just took it from one of the times when His Holiness explained it extensively and took the introduction. But His Holiness introduces in different ways. So let's read what's here first, and then I'll add some things. Introduction. So His Holiness says, as I have often mentioned, as a means to understand and practice bodhicitta, it is very important to study the text, A Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva. I myself contemplate and meditate on bodhicitta and emptiness regularly every morning as a core practice. Therefore, I urge all of you, my Dharma friends, to also make every effort to cultivate a good understanding and meditate on emptiness and bodhicitta as much as possible. And this is advice His Holiness gives again and again and again. When I think of all of His Holiness teachings as an advice, like, to me, this is the main advice His Holiness gives to, of course, he gives to those who are Buddhist and, clearly are seeing him as a teacher, which is, most of the Tibetan people who would be in the audience, and then many of the Western people in the audience. But even even when His Holiness is giving a kind of a talk in a secular setting, like a public talk, His Holiness will often speak about the benefits of not so much emptiness, but dependent arising. The benefits of reflecting on dependent arising, and not so much bodhicitta, but compassion, right? The benefits of practicing compassion as a way of life. Yeah. So, And that makes sense. I mean, if His Holiness is the Buddha of compassion, then of course that's what he's going to teach. But I mean, but not just, well, because he's the Buddha, like I'm the Buddha of compassion, so that's what I teach, but because he feels like that's what's really most beneficial for people, no? And he gives a lot of reasons why that attitude of compassion and the view of dependent arising are so beneficial. Oftentimes, His Holiness will summarize the entirety of Buddha's teachings as the you know, the behavior of ethics, of not harming, the behavior of nonviolence, not harming, ahimsa, and the view of dependent arising, that all things are interconnected, and then also the attitude of compassion. And actually, you could subsume the attitude of compassion into the behavior of non-harming, right? Because that's like the motivation to not harm oneself, not harm to others, is the wish for self and others to be free from suffering, which is compassion. So you can also just subsume that Buddhism, the whole of Buddhism, into the view of dependent arising and the attitude or the behavior of not harming and compassion together. Yeah. And yeah, so as His Holiness says here, it says, I myself contemplate and meditate on bodhicitta and emptiness regularly every morning as a core practice. This is another thing His Holiness, especially in the last 10 years, His Holiness has said again and again and again that, looking over the entire arc of his own life, from having been born, as a child in a farming family in far eastern Tibet, and then having been recognized at the Dalai Lama, and then entered in this very, kind of, you know, uh, compared to normal people, a totally bizarre kind of life, right? As the young child is recognized as the Dalai Lama, but raised in a monastic setting, and in a spiritual setting, and then yeah. Anyway, I won't speak about everything His Holiness says, but especially through his study of Buddhism and Buddhist philosophy, then he speaks about how he was, genuinely moved by the teachings of compassion and dependent arising, and found those, especially when he was given the mantle of leadership of the Tibetan. At that time was its own country in a way, before 1959, at the age of like 16. So it must have been incredibly stressful, while the Communist Chinese government is slowly invading, already beginning in 1952 from the far eastern region of Tibet, slowly, coming across the Tibetan plateau, and taking more and more power and control and engaging in more and more atrocities. And then eventually had to flee his own homeland in 1959, come into exile, and then tried to lead the people in surviving, basically, and creating sustainable communities of Tibetan culture, and in exile in India. Yeah, must have been incredibly stressful, and also, to see, and I mean, the massacre happened in 1959, just after he fled. There's a huge massacre in Lhasa in Tibet, and then destruction of, all the things they held, so many of the temples and stupas and the statues and holy objects they held most dear, not to mention, destruction of so many families and so many lives, of Tibetans in Tibet. So, His Holiness enduring all that, and then, living his 50 years in his exile, he says often that one of the things that was the most helpful in helping him to kind of find a way through all those hardships is his own attitude of compassion, and the view of dependent arising and emptiness, to have this very broad, expansive view of things, not take anything like too seriously, in a way. Although, I mean, of course, he takes things incredibly seriously, but to not be overwhelmed by frustration or grief or hopelessness, but to remain hopeful, and also to not be consumed by resentment and anger towards the Chinese or others, enable them, but to remain, compassionate towards the Chinese and humane, and Yeah, and even though deeply disagreeing, to remain in a way like respectful, and yeah, to be open to dialogue, although that hasn't really worked. But in the practical situation of freeing Tibet, but it's definitely worked in accomplishing the sort of the universal recognition of the you can say the validity of the Tibetan people's aspiration to have a homeland. You know, His Holiness campaigned to make the situation of the Tibetan people known around the world and recognized, and to gain support from other countries in Europe, in the Americas, and other places around the world, has been incredibly successful, right? So the Tibetan situation is well known around the world and has support from many people, and that's largely independence upon His Holiness spreading this message of forgiveness and compassion, kindness, and then together with this view of that we're all interconnected as a global human family, and that none of us exist in isolation, in independence from one another. So therefore we can't afford, and it's totally unjustifiable to oppress others or treat others in a way we ourselves wouldn't want to be treated, in short. Right? So His Holiness, and so this is I mean, I'm all kind of expanding on this, what he's saying here. I myself contemplate and meditate on bodhicitta and emptiness regularly every morning. His Holiness says this again and again. The first thing when he wakes up in the morning is recite this verse of praise to Shakyamuni Buddha that I just recited after the refuge and bodhicitta prayer, and which we recite regularly in Exploring Buddhism at the beginning of each session. And then he'll recite some verses, some of which we'll touch on as during this weekend, but recite some verses from Bodhisattva's Way of Life about actually from Nagarjuna. I'm not sure I don't know the exact order His Holiness recites, but generally there's several verses that His Holiness often quotes and says he uses these as the basis for his contemplation on bodhicitta and then emptiness. So I'll recite those in the morning and then meditate even before he gets out of bed. He says no. And he encourages, and then, so that sets the tone for the entire day, right? So he encourages us to do likewise. He says, therefore, I urge all of you, my Dharma friends, to also make every effort to cultivate a good understanding, to support with study and reflection, and also a good understanding, and meditate on emptiness and bodhicitta as much as possible. And then, of course, try to continue to maintain those attitudes and that view of emptiness throughout the day by coming back to it again and again at different times, at least when we do our daily commitments. Whether, even from having taken refuge, we have a commitment to take refuge 3 times each day and 3 times each night. So we should at least do in the morning and the evening, but if possible to do more frequently. Also at lunchtime, maybe in the afternoon or early evening, and then at the end of one's day at night before you go to sleep. It's only beneficial enough to do. So at that time, even if we have this minimum commitment of going for refuge 3 days, 3 times a day and 3 times a night, at that time also to bring to mind this attitude of bodhicitta and the remembrance of emptiness. Then if we take bodhisattva vows, of course, there's even, as part of the bodhisattva vows, even as part of wishing bodhicitta, there's a commitment to generating at least the mind aspiring to generate bodhicitta, and thinking about the benefits of doing so. And the drawbacks of not doing so 3 times a day and 3 times a night. Then if we take engaging bodhisattva vows, there's even more commitments related to. And of course, the point of all these commitments is not just to give us another something we have to do, to burden us with some kind of hardship, but it's to kind of to encourage us to actually unite our own daily activities of life with more and more with kind of the essentials and some of the most beneficial aspects of our Dharma practice, and thereby benefit us, right? So then he goes on. The source of the meditation. So then he speaks specifically about this practice. So essentially, it's all this all-encompassing yoga mind is a practice where we unite this attitude of bodhicitta together with the view of emptiness, and then we strongly identify together with that. We imagine, try to vividly imagine actually becoming those attitudes, as a person. I'll speak about this more later, but the idea is that we sort of break down, think of, deconstructionalism, like we deconstruct our ordinary idea of what we are as a person, and then from scratch, from the most fundamental basis, then we imagine constructing ourselves newly, as something that's, as a person, as something that's, its main constituents are the attitude of bodhicitta and the view of emptiness, and then strongly identifying with that. So I'll speak more about that later, but this comes from, but that's related because he's saying now that this comes from Tantra. This practice comes from Tantra, and that kind of deconstruction of our ordinary idea of what we are as a person and reconstructing it as having the qualities of an enlightened being is an essential practice of Tantra. Right? So that's why it's combined. So he says, the source of this meditation, called All-encompassing Yoga Mind, is actually the Tantric teachings, or one part of the Tantric teaching. It belongs to the Tantric teaching. After the preparatory, so he's saying after the preparatory rituals, it is presented as a visualization in the actual initiation. So he's talking about in ordinary, like long sadhana, say like Yamantaka or Guhya Samaja or something. In some of those it's found. In the Guhya Samaja it's found. Yamataka, I think it's not there, I don't think, but in some of the long sadhanas, this practice is found. But especially in the self-initiation rituals, which one's only entitled to or qualified to do those self-initiation once one's received, taken refuge, taken bodhisattva vows, taken tantric vows, then received highest yoga tantra initiation, and then engaged in the retreat of one of the deities that one's taken initiation into, and one upholds the commitments, and then does a fire puja, a purifying fire puja at the end. Then one is qualified to do self-initiation. But as part of the self-initiation rituals, then oftentimes almost most of the time, this practice is found at the beginning. Probably not all cases, but in many cases. So, this all-encompassing yoga mind is really a practice from highest yoga tantra, and really a practice within highest yoga tantra for those who are quite qualified, So His Holiness is, again, it's like another instance where His Holiness is really kind of a trailblazer, and quite, I don't have to share the whole time. Presenting an aspect of teachings of the Buddhist teachings in a very public way that most other teachers would not do. But His Holiness has both because of his status as the Dalai Lama, and also the high regard and respect he's earned from the community of the Buddhist Tibetans specifically, and then Buddhist teachers more broadly. Then His Holiness kind of uniquely qualified to adopt this practice in such a way that and share it with a wider public audience. But it's something like, I don't know of any other Buddhist teacher who's done that specifically, not with this practice. But in general, other things like you did find, like Lama Geshe was kind of revolutionary in that way, also a bit sharing, teaching like the 8 absorptions at the time of death, right in intro courses, as part of the presentation of what happens, when we die. And also like Vajrasattva practice, introducing Vajrasattva purification practice, because usually that's another practice of Tantra, and usually highest yoga Tantra, not exclusively. I think there's lower Tantra forms, but it's not something usually done. Anyway, So he says, after the preparatory rituals, it is presented as a visualization in the actual initiation. So the actual initiation means like, yeah, the initiation of a deity. So usually it's it's this practice is included as part of that. As its owner says, after the preparatory rituals include things like, going for refuge, generating bodhicitta motivation, visualizing the field of refuge, the four measurable thoughts, and then blessing the substances to be used, the inner offering, the external offerings, offering a mandala, and so forth. Those kind of preparatory rituals. So it comes after that. However, for those, here's this Holiness kind of justification. However, for those who have a sincere and keen interest to develop bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, I see no reason why it wouldn't be appropriate for you to adopt this meditation practice. So His Holiness is saying, because essentially this meditation practice, yes, although it comes from Tantra, basically it's just a kind of a sort of way of combining a visualization to unify these two meditations on bodhicitta and on emptiness. Then I don't see, there's nothing sort of forbidden or that needs to be kept secret, as there are like with other aspects of Tantra in this practice. So I don't see why it's not suitable for just, anyone who has, as he says, has a keen interest to meditate on bodhicitta and develop a deep understanding of emptiness, to use this practice. And that's his justification. Let's take a 5-minute break now. And then if there's any questions so far, I can give you the opportunity to ask questions after that. So a 5-minute break. And if we do it well, we can generate this contrived bodhicitta in that step. But then, just to maybe tie up the loose ends of this discussion is, is that, the conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta, they're like two wings of a bird, right? They're the method, conventional bodhicitta is the method side of the path. Ultimate bodhicitta is the wisdom side of the path. And we need both of those to go to, to cross the great ocean of samsara and arrive at the state of full enlightenment. But I guess in a way it's like, in a way it's like, well, what if you only meditated on one or the other, right? Eventually, even if you just meditated on bodhicitta, eventually you would also realize emptiness, because you would see the need to free yourself and others from suffering, that you have to realize emptiness, and then you would meditate on emptiness, right? Even if you were just to meditate on emptiness, I don't know, would you eventually also meditate on bodhicitta? I think so, probably, because eventually, meditating on emptiness, you would be free from grasping at a self. Therefore, you'd be free from selfish concern. Therefore, you'd eventually be free from attachment and ignorance. So you would achieve a state of nirvana, of freedom from samsara, and you would abide in a state of peace for a long time. And it's said, at least in the Mahayana Sutras, that eventually, if you, by any other means, you didn't enter the path, the Mahayana path to achieve full enlightenment, the Buddhas would kind of wake you from the state of peace, of nirvana, and tell you that you need to meditate on bodhicitta in order to achieve enlightenment. So in this other very roundabout way, you would eventually meditate on bodhicitta as well. But it's much quicker, right, if we just meditate on both right from the beginning. So I guess that's why, why is ultimate bodhicitta, why is it called bodhicitta, given the name bodhicitta? It's, in a way, maybe it's helpful, we need to clarify also. Ultimate bodhicitta isn't just the mind meditating on emptiness, right? Even, of course, now, if we meditate on emptiness, now when we try to understand and meditate on emptiness, we are meditating on emptiness. Have we realized emptiness? Like, probably not. No, for myself, like I can say no. um, so, but even when we've realized emptiness, at that point, we're not necessarily on a path, right? We're only on a path when we generate actual renunciation or actual bodhicitta, right, or both. Those are the marks of entry into the path. If we just generate actual renunciation, then we've entered the path of accumulation of hearers or solitary realizers, right? If we just generate uncontrived renunciation without bodhicitta, and then if we, at the moment we generate uncontrived bodhicitta, that's the gateway to enter the Mahayana path. So we enter the Mahayana path of accumulation, right? And so, for those of you not familiar with these 5 paths, this is what we'll study in Exploring Buddhism, like next June, beginning in June. No. June we do tenets. So June, July, August. About September, we'll study grounds and paths. Yeah. But this is from grounds and paths. Oh, yeah. Okay, so ultimate bodhicitta. So when does ultimate bodhicitta arise? Ultimate bodhicitta. When does ultimate bodhicitta arise? So even if we can realize emptiness before we enter the path. So that's what I'm saying. So we only enter a path, either the path of hearers and solitary realizers when we generate uncontrived renunciation alone, or the path of bodhisattvas, the Mahayana path, when we generate uncontrived bodhicitta. And then even at that point, once we've entered the path of accumulation, the realization of emptiness in that bodhisattva's mind is not ultimate bodhicitta. And then there's the path of preparation. We only generate ultimate bodhicitta when we directly realize emptiness. When we have a non-conceptual direct perception of emptiness, at that time that's actually called ultimate bodhicitta. Is that that mind of meditative equipoise directly or perceptually realizing emptiness, and that in the mind of a bodhisattva, it's conjoined with. It means it's supported by this attitude of bodhicitta, right? So it's conjoined with conventional bodhicitta, right? So ultimate bodhicitta is a mind that's directly and perceptually realizing emptiness, and it's conjoined with attitude of bodhicitta. That's what ultimate bodhicitta is. So it's a very high level realization. But the whole method in Tantra is to, instead of feeling like very small and impotent and powerless and kind of weak, striving to climb this huge mountain, right? To imagine, to kind of eliminate or clear away that sort of low self-esteem in a way, rather than identifying with all our faults and limitations, to just deconstruct all of those, deconstruct what we are, kind of totally rethink what we are as a person. And first of all, just like wipe the slate clean in a way, start from scratch, and then imagine the full development of this positive potential that we have for this attitude of bodhicitta and this wisdom realizing emptiness, which is ultimate bodhicitta, direct perception of emptiness. So then we try to vividly, to the best of our ability and the best of our understanding, we try to vividly imagine actualizing those attitudes and then strongly identify with that, right? And that's a very powerful method for quickly progressing the development of those attitudes in our continuum. Right? And then in this specific method, then we combine that imagination with this visual image. Just because, a visual image, it's like a symbol. It's a symbol, and then just by bringing that symbol to mind, it brings to mind reference to all of the details of all those attitudes. So it's a very effective tool just to remind ourselves in an instant, oh, this is what I aspire to. This is what I'm trying to become, just by remembering that symbol at our heart. Right? Okay. I'll just explain for another few minutes and then check again if you have any questions. So, yeah, conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta. Mm. So conventional bodhicitta, again, is what we ordinarily think of as bodhicitta. And His Holiness says, so let us first generate conventional bodhicitta. And then he quotes this verse from, he says, as Chandakirti says, in the homage verse of his entering the middle way, as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood, the water that nourishes it, and the fruit that is long its source of enjoyment, I will praise compassion at the start of all. So, of course, His Holiness speaks about compassion first. Let's just read his commentary on it, that verse, and then I'll come back and explain it in more detail. His Holiness says, instead, so I'll read the verse again, just so you internalize it a bit before we read His Holiness comments. As compassion, so it's about compassion, as compassion alone is accepted to be the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood. So imagine Buddhahood as a harvest, like a crop, a harvest of crops, and compassion is the seeds that you plant in the field that give rise to that harvest. Is the seed of the perfect harvest of Buddhahood. It is the water that nourishes it. So after the seeds are planted, they need to be nourished with water, right? And compassion is also like the water that nourishes those seeds, the water that nourishes it. And the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment. So imagine when the crops, like a crop of wheat or rice, when the crops bear fruit, then the fruit are the grains that you can eat for a long time, right? You harvest that crop, and then put the grains in storage, and then it can sustain your life for a long time, right? So he's saying bodhicitta is compassion is also like that. It's also like the fruit that is long a source of enjoyment. And therefore, I will praise compassion at the start of all. So it's quite paradoxical that this text by Chandakirti is all about emptiness. It's not about bodhicitta, really. It's all about emptiness, entering the middle way. It's his commentary on Nagarjuna's root wisdom, the meaning commentary. But at the beginning, usually when an author is composing a text about emptiness, or translators in the Tibetan translators were translating texts on emptiness, usually they praise Manjushri at the beginning, the God of wisdom, right? The Buddha of wisdom. Or oftentimes someone would praise Buddha, the one who taught about emptiness, right? Or would praise, like, and here he's Chandakirti, in this context, he's writing a commentary on Nagarjuna's explanation of emptiness. So it would make sense if he would praise like Nagarjuna, but he doesn't do any of those things. He praises compassion at the beginning. So let's see what His Holiness says. Instead of offering praise and salutation to other worthy objects of veneration, like Manjushri or the Buddha or Nagarjuna or the Sangha or something, Chandakirti at the very beginning offers praise to compassion. This homage indicates that the development of compassion is of greatest importance. Indeed, there are extensive explanations on developing wisdom in the teachings, and especially in this teaching by Chandakirti. However, it is only when wisdom is combined with compassion that it becomes an actual cause of enlightenment, right? So only when wisdom is combined with compassion does it become a cause of enlightenment. Think like, those who are aspiring just to be free from samsara, right? Like those on the hearer path or the solitary realizer path. Their intention is just to achieve freedom from samsara for themselves alone, probably because that's all they think is possible for them. They meditate on wisdom. They generate wisdom realizing emptiness. They directly realize emptiness, right? They generate all the 5 paths, including the path of seeing and the path of meditation. But then why don't they achieve enlightenment? Because that wisdom realizing emptiness isn't combined with great compassion. They also have compassion. From within the 4 immeasurable thoughts, they have immeasurable compassion, right? The wish that all sentient beings be free from suffering. But what is lacking is the sense of personal responsibility, that I take personal responsibility to free all sentient beings from suffering. So it's because the wisdom in their mind is not combined with compassion, that it doesn't become a cause of enlightenment. And we can, I mean, on a smaller scale, or a more maybe our more immediate, to relate it more to our immediate experience of the world, we can see how. I mean, why is this? There's this book. Daniel Goleman is a journalist and who specializes in writing about developments in science. I mean, now he's a very well-known, famous author, but he's a close collaborator with His Holiness and the Mind Life Institute. But his most famous book, that he wrote, the most famous book he wrote in his whole life is called Emotional Intelligence, which I'm sure you've all heard of, right? Why? Yeah, Emotional Intelligence. Yeah, Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Daniel Goleman. And why is that such an influential book? Like, at least in American culture, I'm not sure, probably beyond as well. But because previous to that, people, there's the IQ. People are concerned about what's their IQ, what's the IQ of their child, with the idea that the IQ is a strong predictor of one's future success in life. It's a strong, the higher IQ you have, probably the better, which is kind of a natural intelligence that you have. It's not really a trained intelligence so much as a natural capacity for particular kinds of intelligence, but that the greater you have of those types of intelligence that are measured by the IQ test, that the better you'll do at school, and the better the better job you'll get, the more success you'll have in your career, and so the better life you'll have. But many studies found that that's actually not the case. Oftentimes, people with a high IQ, they actually don't do that well in life. And so big questions arose. Well, why is that? Which led to further studies about what are actually more accurate predictors of success in life, and including not just career success or financial success, but happiness, right, in life. And so there's a whole big body of science that found actually it has to do with emotional qualities. And so Daniel Goleman was reporting in that book, Emotional Intelligence, he's reporting on this whole development in science, right? That that actually what's a better predictor of success in life, not only financially, he makes a strong point. Even, people might think, oh, well, if you're more emotionally mature, you'll have a happier life, but financially you won't be more successful. But that's actually not true. Actually, people who are good at, at making money, they need to make good connections with other people. They need to know how to collaborate with others. To know how to collaborate with others, you need to have a psychology. You need to understand their psychology, which means you need to empathize. You need to feel a degree of what they feel, whether for good or bad, and understand where they're at. And then you can communicate clearly with them, and you can build up trust, and you can work together with them in different capacities, and then you can have success. So, but it's similar to this idea. I mean, this kind of correlation between, this understanding that just a kind of analytical, rational intelligence alone is not a good predictor of success. We also need a sort of emotional intelligence where we understand we're in touch with our own emotions and understand our own emotional life, and therefore based on that we can understand the emotional life of others, and then connect with them in a much more deeper way, a much more effective, and a way that we can build trust, right, with others, is important, right, for success in life. It's very similar to this idea that just meditation on wisdom alone cannot lead you to the full development of your human potential, right? You need compassion, right? And you need not only compassion for yourselves, but compassion for others, right? That's an incredibly powerful catalyst. So, and that's why paradoxically, Chandakirti praises compassion at the beginning of a work that's all about wisdom, to kind of remind the reader that, wisdom alone, this analytical, rational understanding of the ultimate truth, ultimate nature of things, that alone is not enough. It needs to be right from the beginning, nourished and supported by a mind of kindness and caring about others, and compassion, wishing to accomplish the welfare not only of oneself but of others, right? So
But you see that also in the Heart Sutra, that Avalokiteshvara is the one who's answering the whole questions on emptiness.
Yeah,
Because
good
their
point.
idea,
Yeah, it's a similar paradox that the Heart Sutra, which is all about emptiness,
emptiness. Yeah.
the main speaker there is the Buddha of compassion, not Manjushri, right? The Buddha of wisdom. Yeah, it's a similar pattern that you see there.
Geshe,
One minute. Let's just read through this paragraph, and then we can open the floor. So he says, this homage indicates it might be good we get like 5 different mics. No, could we do that? It'd be kind of cool. Or have like, have 4 different like mic stands in the room. You can just, and to be too much many. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Anyway. Okay. Yes, in our new space, yeah. Maybe we can just bug all the walls. No. Put bugs in all the walls. Okay. Anyway, indeed, there are extensive explanations on what. So he says, this homage indicates that the development of compassion is of greatest importance. Indeed, there are extensive explanations on developing wisdom in the teachings. However, it is only when, so this is what we're talking about. However, it is only when wisdom is combined with compassion that it becomes an actual cause of enlightenment. So only when wisdom is combined with compassion, that becomes an actual cause of enlightenment. Similarly, only when like a high IQ is combined with emotional intelligence, that it becomes an actual cause of success in life. Thus, without compassion, no matter what kind of attainments one may achieve, whether it be a certain level of miraculous powers or superhuman feats, there is no real benefit. There's no deep benefit. Therefore, let us first reflect on generating compassion. Okay, so now, Madhu or anyone else?
Just a quick reminder, I was trying to write down the 7 point techniques for meditation on bodhicitta, and you were just saying the 7-fold cause and effect meditation. The first one you were saying was recognize all sentient beings as your mother, and the last one was, of course, achieving enlightenment. Can you tell us about the remaining ones? Or is that going to be in a different, it's going to be in a different...
That'll come. That'll come.
And we did it in class.
Well, actually, I'm going to focus on the equalizing, exchanging self and others method. But why don't I just get it out of the way now? I'll just answer your question. So the sevenfold, you can also Google it. It'll come right up. But they are recognizing all sentient beings have been your mother, remembering their kindness, wishing to repay, generating the wish to repay their kindness, affectionate love, compassion, the extraordinary attitude, just like the secret sauce, and then bodhicitta. Bodhicitta. Sure, yeah.
The great compassion, does that imply extraordinary attitude? Because when you were talking about the causal aspiration is great compassion, but then it's accompanied by extraordinary attitude, or great compassion already subsumed the...
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that, a lot of debate back and forth about that. But basically, yes, you could think, I think it's easier just to think of great compassion. The extraordinary attitude is great compassion, right? Because the important thing is, like, we have to find a way to distinguish just ordinary compassion from immeasurable compassion. In the 4 immeasurables, immeasurable compassion, which is an object of meditation of those in the Pali tradition, the Theravada tradition, right? They also have that, and distinguish that from great compassion. So usually, the easy way to distinguish great compassion from those other 2 is that it's whereby one takes a personal responsibility, right? So you could think of it as the extraordinary attitude. Yeah. There's a temptation, because the name is great compassion, and that's an accurate translation, to think that, well, great compassion, it's a compassion that is extended to more beings than just immeasurable compassion. But that's not a good way to distinguish, right? Because immeasurable compassion is also extended to all beings, right? Without bias. So you can't really distinguish that way. So a better way to distinguish, which is what happens when you combine it with the extraordinary attitude, is that great compassion is distinguished from immeasurable compassion in that one has a personal responsibility. One develops a sense of personal responsibility that I myself will do whatever I can to free all sentient beings from suffering. Yeah. But even there, the question arises, couldn't someone just meditating on immeasurable compassion generate that? I mean, they definitely, of course they can, but do most or not? I don't know. But that extraordinary attitude is considered, yeah, that's kind of what establishes one in the race of a Buddha, you can think. So it's like what distinguishes one from a person merely aspiring to achieve freedom from samsara for themselves alone. It was largely that attitude. And then, of course, bodhicitta in addition. Yeah. But in short, yeah, great compassion in this extraordinary attitude, I think it's most helpful just to think of them as the same thing. Two different terms for the same attitude. Okay, there's just short time left for one small question. There's another additional question. Yes, that's Mary.
Perhaps you're going to be discussing this later. So if I don't get the answer now, it won't keep me from enjoying the pizza that's stuck in my mind now.
Okay.
But when we're visualizing the moon disk and the vajra, are there particular aspects, particular details of the vajra that we're meant to include in the visualization?
No, just
So
I mean,
okay.
there are particular. We'll get to that later. There are some general aspects of the vajra, but basically, if you can just as pictured, is enough. But of course, I mean, the picture it's a two-dimensional representation of a three-dimensional object, right? But yeah. Okay. Just briefly dedicate in your own mind, whatever way you wish. Just especially, it's important to seal the dedication with emptiness. I think I'm not so good at remembering to do this, but especially since we're in this little short course, it's about emptiness and bodhicitta. So remember that we can seal the dedication with emptiness, thinking that whatever merits we've created now, and we can rejoice in the merits, infinite merits created by others, other ordinary beings and enlightened beings. So all this collection of merit gathered together is empty of existing from its own side because of being a dependently arisen phenomena, or many phenomena. And we, the person dedicating, are empty. And then all the action of dedicating itself is a dependent arising, and therefore empty. And then all the things that we dedicate towards. So here, you come up with your own dedication. What you want to dedicate towards. Note especially the well-being of all sentient beings, and for that purpose ourselves to become enlightened. Then all of that we dedicate for ourselves, other sentient beings, enlightenment, all empty of existing from their own side. Okay, enjoy your lunch break. We reconvene in an hour and a half at 2:00.